Ever feel like your body's like completely betraying you? Internal alarm system is just stuck on high alert and you just can't hit the off switch. Well, what if I told you there's a way to like hack that system, to actually take control of those things that seem totally automatic? Well, that's what we're diving into today, biofeedback therapy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field, because it really kind of flips the script on how we usually think about our bodies. We see these functions as totally out of our control, right? But biofeedback really shows us how powerful that mind-body connection actually is.
Okay, so paint a picture for me here. We're talking like sensors, real-time data. It sounds kind of like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, honestly.
It does sound futuristic, but I promise it's very real. So imagine this. You're hooked up to these sensors and they're tracking things like your heart rate, muscle tension, even your brain waves. And here's the thing, that data, it isn't just going into some like void, it's displayed right there in front of you. So you can actually see what's happening inside your body at that very moment.
So it's like holding up a mirror to your insides, right? All that stuff you usually wouldn't even be aware of, let alone be able to control.
Exactly. It's all about bringing those hidden connections, the ones between your thoughts, your feelings, your physical responses, bringing all that to the surface. It makes them, visible. And more importantly, manageable.
Okay, so it's not about some machine like taking the wheel. It's about giving you the tools to actually be in the driver's seat. But how does that even work?
Okay, think of it like learning an instrument. At first, you need that external guidance.
Right.
The sheet music, the teacher telling you where to put your fingers.
Right.
So in biofeedback, that guidance, it comes from the technology itself, the beeps, the visuals, those act as your guide, letting you know when you're like moving in the right direction.
Okay, so let's say you clench your jaw when you're stressed, leading to those tension headaches. So does the biofeedback machine basically go ding when you manage to relax those muscles?
You got it. It's about providing that immediate feedback, and it helps you connect the dots between your conscious effort to relax and what's actually happening in your body, that physical change. But here's where it gets really interesting. Over time, as you practice, you start to recognize the feeling of relaxation itself without needing those external cues. You know what I mean? You basically trained your body to recognize and then replicate that state.
That's wild. It's like you're literally rewiring your responses. But I gotta know, what kind of things can biofeedback actually help with?
The list is surprisingly long. And we're talking about managing anxiety, reducing how often you get migraines, even getting a handle on things like IBS.
Wow, IBS, that's amazing. I've heard from friends how, like, debilitating that can be. Are there any other conditions where biofeedback is showing, particular promise?
It's showing some really incredible potential for managing stress and addiction. Two areas that, we often see kind of deeply intertwined. Think about it. During withdrawal, the body's in complete chaos, right? Biofeedback can actually help individuals regain a sense of control over those really intense, physical and psychological symptoms, which can be a total game changer, especially in recovery.
That's fascinating. I've always been curious about, how people break free from those, like, deeply ingrained patterns of addiction. So we're not just talking about treating the addiction itself, but actually giving people the tools to manage that, like, incredibly intense withdrawal process.
Exactly. Biofeedback, it empowers people, right, to take a more active role in their own recovery, which can be incredibly empowering during a time when they might feel like they have very little control.
This is already blowing my mind. And honestly, I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. Now, we've mentioned a few different types of biofeedback, thermal, electromyography. Could you break those down a bit more for us?
Absolutely. Let's start with thermal biofeedback. It might sound complex, but it's pretty straightforward, honestly. It just involves putting sensors on your fingertips, and those measure your skin temperature.
Wait, skin temperature. How does that relate to, well, anything?
It's pretty amazing. You know how, like, your hands get cold when you're stressed out, or you might start sweating when you're under pressure. Well, those are actually subtle changes in your skin temperature. We often don't consciously register them, but they're directly connected to our stress response. So thermal biofeedback, it makes those fluctuations visible. So you're getting that immediate feedback on, your stress levels.
So with thermal biofeedback, you're basically like learning to recognize those early warning signs of stress, the ones you might not even notice otherwise.
Yeah, precisely. And once you're aware of those like subtle shifts, you can start using, relaxation techniques to
Yeah.
consciously bring that temperature back down. It's like you're short-circuiting that stress response before it really takes hold.
That's so cool. Okay, what about electromyography? That one honestly sounds kind of intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds, I promise. Electromyography, or EMG for short, it basically measures muscle tension. Remember how we were talking about, clenching your jaw when you're stressed?
Oh, yeah. Guilty as charged.
Well, EMG biofeedback, it can actually help you become more aware of those like unconscious muscle contractions, and then you can actually train yourself to like relax those specific muscles.
So it's like you're getting a backstage pass to how your muscles are reacting, even when you're not aware of it.
Exactly. It's like shining a spotlight on those hidden patterns of, tension. And once you're aware of them, then you can actually start to like break those patterns.
Now we can't forget about the most mind-bending type of biofeedback, neurofeedback. You mentioned earlier this one actually measures brainwave activity, which is honestly wild.
It really is like pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
Hmm.
Neurofeedback, it takes things a step further by actually tapping into the electrical activity in our brains.
Okay, so how does that even work? Are we talking about like some kind of high-tech brain scan?
It's simpler than you might think. It just involves placing sensors on your scalp, and they can actually detect these tiny, tiny electrical signals, the ones produced by your brain waves. And just like with those other types of biofeedback, that information is then like translated to real-time feedback, something you can actually see and hear.
So you're basically watching your brainwaves in action. That must be a total trip.
It is pretty amazing. It's like having a window into your own brain. But here's where things get really interesting. Remember we were talking about neuroplasticity before?
Hmm.
That incredible ability of our brains to actually change and adapt.
Yeah, the idea that our brains aren't like set in stone, we can actually rewire them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And neurofeedback, it harnesses that power. By providing that real-time feedback on your brainwave activity, it basically allows you to like consciously influence those patterns. It's like giving your brain a workout, basically.
So instead of lifting weights, you're shifting your brainwaves. I kind of love that analogy.
It's a great way to think about it. And just like any workout, consistency is key. So with neurofeedback, it typically takes multiple sessions to see those, lasting changes in your brainwave patterns.
Okay, so let's say someone's hearing this and thinking, sign me up for brain training. Where do I sign? What kind of conditions can neurofeedback actually help with?
So neurofeedback has shown some really incredible promise for, honestly, a wide range of conditions. It's being used to help people manage their ADHD symptoms, reduce their anxiety and stress, even improve sleep in people with insomnia.
Insomnia, huh? That's really interesting. Could you maybe explain a little bit about like how it helps with that?
Sure. So see, when we sleep, our brains, they actually cycle through these different stages, right?
Yeah.
Each of them is associated with like specific brainwave patterns. And insomnia often involves, disruptions to those patterns, which makes it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. So what neurofeedback can do is help retrain the brain to produce those sleep-promoting brainwave patterns, leading to, hopefully, more restful sleep.
Wow, that's amazing. I know like so many people who struggle with sleep issues. This could be like a real game changer for them. Now, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I don't want to just skim over like the empowerment aspect of biofeedback. We've kind of touched on it a few times, but I think it's worth really emphasizing.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree. One of the most, honestly, profound benefits of biofeedback is that it empowers people. Like, it helps them take an active role in their own health and well-being. It shifts that whole dynamic from passive patient to active participant.
It's like for so long, we've just been told, okay, here's a pill, this is going to fix it. But biofeedback is like, no, you have the power to influence your own body and your mind. You are not broken.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing that innate healing capacity, the one that we all have within us. And then it's about giving you the tools to actually tap into it, which can be incredibly empowering, especially for people who have maybe felt like they didn't have any control,
Yeah.
Over their bodies or their conditions.
Speaking of control, you mentioned earlier that biofeedback is showing a lot of promise in like addiction recovery. Could you maybe delve a little deeper into that?
Absolutely. So addiction is a really complex issue, and we know it's not just a simple matter of willpower, right? It's about these deeply ingrained patterns in the brain, those like intense cravings that can feel almost impossible to resist.
Mhm.
So biofeedback helps by addressing both the physical and the psychological aspects of addiction.
Could you give us like an example of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Let's say someone's trying to, quit smoking. They might use a type of biofeedback called heart rate variability training. And essentially, they learn to consciously control their heart rate, which can actually help reduce those intense cravings.
So instead of like reaching for a cigarette when that craving hits, they can use these techniques to kind of calm their nervous system down.
Exactly. It's all about equipping people with the tools they need, right?
Right.
To actually manage those urges and regain a sense of agency, especially in a situation where they often feel powerless. And it's important to remember that, biofeedback isn't meant to be like a standalone solution. It's definitely most effective when it's used as sort of a comprehensive treatment plan. One that might include therapy, support groups, maybe even medication.
It sounds like biofeedback could be like that missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people who are, in recovery. That extra layer of support that can really help them through those like really challenging moments. Now, we've talked a lot about the benefits, but are there any downsides or like risks people should be aware of?
Biofeedback is generally considered really safe,
Really?
especially when it's, guided by a qualified practitioner. It's non-invasive. There aren't any medications involved. It's really just about tapping into your body's own abilities. But it's important to remember that it's not like a magic bullet. It's not a quick fix, and it's definitely not going to work for everyone in the exact same way.
So, like with any therapeutic approach, realistic expectations are key.
For sure. For sure. It takes time. It takes effort to learn these new skills and to actually integrate them into your daily life. It's a journey, not, a sprint.
I imagine a lot of our listeners right now are like, okay, this all sounds amazing, but where do I even start? What's the first step for someone who's, maybe interested in exploring biofeedback?
Honestly, the best first step is always to just talk to your doctor or, a healthcare provider. They can help you figure out if biofeedback is a good fit for you, for your individual needs, and they can potentially refer you to a qualified practitioner in your area.
So you're saying like, don't just go buy some random biofeedback machine online and start, experimenting.
Exactly. While there are some at-home devices out there, it's super important to have that professional guidance, especially if you're dealing with, a specific health condition.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to make sure you're like using the right techniques and actually interpreting that feedback correctly. So let's say someone finds a qualified practitioner. What can they, actually expect during a typical biofeedback session?
Usually it starts with a conversation, about your health history, your goals for therapy, that kind of thing. And then the practitioner will attach sensors to your skin. Don't worry, these are totally painless, totally non-invasive. They often use adhesive pads.
So no needles or anything scary.
No needles, I promise. It's actually quite relaxing. You'll just be sitting comfortably in the biofeedback machine. It'll start displaying your, physiological responses.
Yeah.
But here's the cool part. It's all in real time. So you might see it on a screen, like graphs, charts, sometimes even sounds.
Whoa, it's like you're getting a live feed of what's happening inside your body.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where the learning really begins. The practitioner will then guide you through different technique. It could be like deep breathing exercises, maybe progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness meditation, things like that. And all the while, you're watching how your body responds in real time.
That must be so eye-opening to actually see like your heart rate slow down or your muscles relax as you're doing these techniques.
It can be incredibly powerful. And, over time, as you practice, you actually become more sensitive to those subtle cues from your body, even without the biofeedback machine. It's like you're learning a whole new language, the language of your own body.
This has been absolutely fascinating, honestly. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible with biofeedback as we kind of like wrap up here. Is there any final takeaway that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. You are not at the mercy of your body's reactions. You actually have the power to influence your physiology, to manage your stress, and even retrain your brain. Biofeedback just gives you the tools, the insights to unlock that potential.
It's about taking control, becoming the driver of your own health and well-being. And who knows? As technology keeps advancing, the possibilities might be even more mind-blowing in the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really exciting field with so much potential.
Well, if you're curious to learn more about biofeedback, we definitely encourage you to, do your own research and maybe even have that conversation with your healthcare provider. You might be surprised by what you discover.
It's a journey of self-discovery, that's for sure.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of biofeedback. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep listening to your body. You might be amazed at what you hear.